We started this series that we titled Raiders of the Lost Ark. Last week, we began to explore that time when David went to rescue the ark from the Philistines. And today, we moved to another stage in the story. But before we start into the Word, this message, it is designed for those of you who at one time or another have been misunderstood. In case that has ever happened to you, you said something and it was taken the wrong way. You did something and instead of being celebrated, you were punished. For those of us who have been misunderstood at one time in our lives, this is whom the message is for. David, in this part of the story, experienced misunderstanding like never had experienced before. So let's go to the Word. 2 Samuel chapter 6, verse 12. You have it in your notes. For 3 months, the ark of the Lord had been resting in the house of Obed-Edom. 3 months before, David tried to bring it back, and in his efforts to bring the ark back, a man had died. And this man, Uzzah, died because David, along with all the priests that had been marching with him, forgot to do one little detail: to study what the Word of God instructed on the transportation of the ark. So now, verse 12 says, "And it was told King David, the Lord has blessed the household of Obed-Edom and all that belongs to him because of the ark of God. So David went and brought up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with rejoicing." Now, this idea of rejoicing, it's an idea that permeates the entire story, because the effort of David to bring back the ark was the goal of the nation, to have the presence of God in town, to have the presence of God back into the city. So David is going to do something that will bring back joy to the family, that will restore the happiness to the nation, that will bring peace and guidance, and above all, celebration among the people of Israel. But David, along with all of us, we need to understand one important lesson: that to experience blessings, we need to learn that they're best enjoyed when we patiently wait for them. We live in a time that we're all in a hurry. Notice what happens in verse 13. "And when those who bore the ark of the Lord had gone 6 steps," how many? 6 steps. "He sacrificed an ox and a fatted animal." Now, in case you don't see it yet, this is what happened. They were bringing the ark back. The priests were carrying the ark, now with the 2 poles along the sides of the ark, and they walked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Stop. Offer sacrifice. They moved again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Stop and offer sacrifice. Have you ever been the first one at a stoplight? And for some reason, just the moment before the light turned from red to green, you looked away. What happened? Somebody behind you who was actually paying attention to the green light turning honked at you. Okay, let me change the scenario. Have you ever been the one honking? Because apparently the ones behind the first one are the ones paying attention more than the first one. But this is what happens. We have grown accustomed to be impatient. We want everything quickly. We want everything fast. We hate to wait. That's why we have internet that is faster and faster and faster. We are the only country that has fast food. We've grown in a culture where everything that we want it quickly. And along the way, we have forgotten how important it is to await for the blessings of God. And because we haven't trained ourselves to be patient and to wait, we missed a lot of those blessings that God is willing to bestow upon us. David, as he was coming back with the ark, every 6 steps, he was stopping to thank God for the blessings that will come. In Revelation 14:12, you know this text by memory, I'm pretty sure. It says, here is a call for the endurance of the saints. Other version says, for the patience of the saints. A better translation would say, for the enduring patience, because that's what it means. Enduring patience on those who keep the commandments of God and their faith of Jesus. Now, the word commandment, the word law, where it comes from, in the Greek is very interesting. Because the word law is the word nomos. Can you say nomos? And that's when we, kind of the base from when we get that phrase, the decalogos. Have you heard decalogos? Deca means 10, logos words, 10 commandments. So when the New Testament refers to the law, when Paul refers to the law, he's talking about the decalogos, the 10 commandments. But the word that is utilized here is very interesting because this is the word entole. Can you say entole? Entole sounds like the Mexican drink atole, but it's different. Entole means that is the commandment of God as it comes from his entire word. So for those who are saints of God and are patiently enduring, it is important to await for the blessing as we fulfill the word of God. There is no patient saint waiting for blessings that is not fulfilling the word of God. So what David is trying to teach us here, family, is that as he learned that it was so important to follow the commands of God, as he learned that it was so important to follow the instructions that God had left, he couldn't rush into receiving the blessings. He had to wait patiently. The second lesson that David needed to learn was that he needed to do and wait, and everything he did, he had to do it with all he got. With all he got. In verse 14 it says, and David danced before the Lord with all his might. Now, some of you are already looking at me weird. But let me tell you what's going on in this text. Let me read the whole thing. And David danced before the Lord with all his might, and David was wearing a linen ephod. So David and all the house of Israel brought up the ark of the Lord with shouting and with the sounds of the horn. Let's go back in that text. Let's read it backwards. Everybody's celebrating. There is music. And David is wearing a priestly garment. He is moving. He's walking, he's marching in front of the ark. But he's moving in a very particular way. It says here that he is what? Dancing. There's 2 words for dance in the Bible. 2 words. The first word is the word karker. Can you say karker? Sounds like the place where you take your car for service. Karker. Now, car care is plain and simple to dance. And dancing is being a practice that is present in every culture through history. Even today, we talk about folk dancing and we talk about religious dancing, like dancing in the rain or for rain. Not dancing in the rain, that's a different story. That's a movie. Dancing for rain. like the Native Americans had, or the Aztecs that had their dancing before they went to battle and offered their lives as sacrifice. So dancing has been present in every culture, and the Jews were not the exception. But there's another word. And the other word is makarker. And makarker makes reference to leaping of joy from victory. The best way possible that I can explain this word is with a video that I want to show you. Can I show it to you? Okay.
But best of all was this. Madrid's Dutch manager, Leo Beenhakker, has no doubt. He said at the time, they should change the rules. After a goal like that, you might as well stop the game and send the players to get changed and all go home. You just can't beat it.
And you might be thinking that who is doing makarker is the scorer, but it's not. Who is doing makarker is the people. That people are celebrating, are moving their whatever pieces of cloth they're waving. They're jumping, they're screaming. Who are doing the makarker are the people. Because through that player, they got victory. The word that is used in this text when David is marching is the word makarker. David is not dancing to a rhythmic music. David is jumping of joy because of the victory of bringing the ark of God back home. Now, this is not a new thing for the people of Israel. There was a time when they were coming from Egypt to the promised land. And the nation was marching through the desert. According to some historians, the amount of people that left Egypt were about 2 million men. And you know how it goes without counting the women and the children. So by the time they're going into the mid-40s of the years, like about 20 years into marching in the 40 years, now some scholars believe that the amount of people marching, they were 15 million. So the people of Israel are marching to the promised land. The neighboring kingdoms, they were concerned because the command from God was what? Take over the land. So one of the kings hires a prophet and hires this prophet to tell them a prophecy that would bless him and not the people of Israel. And this prophet name, you know the name, who was? Balaam. And Balaam is hired by the king Balak, and when he comes to the palace, the king tells him, okay, give me a prophecy against the people of Israel. And he's trying really hard. He wants to make this money, right? And he goes, blessings upon Israel. He's like, wait, no. That's not what I hire you to do. That's not what I'm paying you for. You have to give me a blessing and curse them. And he goes, God will bless them with mighty strength. In fact, you have it in your notes. This is one of the blessings. Numbers 23:22, and it says, God brings them out of Egypt as is for them like the horns of a wild ox. And now you're scratching your head and thinking, that's a blessing? Let me explain this to you. Like the horns of the wild ox. For the Jews, there wasn't a stronger animal than the biggest and the strongest animal they had in the farm. It was the ox. And a wild ox was not tame. So the waving of this head, that means that at the end of the head, they had what? Horns. it was a very dangerous thing and very strong that no man could actually hold. So Balaam is saying, when they march through here, they're going to be as strong as anything that you've ever seen. Now, have you ever felt weak? Have you ever felt that there's something that you can't do, but that you have to? Have you ever felt that, oh, that's going to be impossible for me? But let me tell you something. I believe that my God is very strong. Okay, at least one people also believe that. You see, and if my God is very strong, there's nothing that he cannot do. And this is not just lyrics from a little song. If I believe that God can do anything, I have to live my life trusting in a God that can't do anything. So I have to believe that through him I can do anything. So that means that whatever I do, I have to do it with all I've got, because where my weakness begins, God's strength begins. So when my strength begins to dwindle, God's strength begins to take place. So whatever I do, I have to do it with all I got, because if I don't do it like that, and I'm only do it with half my strength, God's strength will never come in. Are you with me? So whatever I do as a child of God, I have to do it with all I got, so that God can work in me with all he's got. So I have to do it like that, because one, he promised that when my weakness shows up, his strength will appear with it. And second, because if I don't do it with all my strength, I will never experience God's strength. So that means, family, that when I celebrate, I gotta do it with all I got. When I worship, I gotta do it with all I got. When I pray, I gotta do it with all I've got. When I serve, I gotta do it with all I've got. When I share, I have to do it with all I've got. When I do anything, I gotta do it with all I got. Because God is saying that when I do whatever I do with all I've got, he is going to bless me. But there's another lesson that David needed to learn. And that was to never mind the criticism. Criticism is part of human nature. We've all done it. In fact, we have professional critics. And all of us have become professional critics. Have you ever posted on Yelp? Have you ever recommended with 5 stars? It's funny, our church has a rating of 4.2 stars. Because we've all become critics. And we like to criticize, to give our opinion about things, about places, about services. But we just don't like it when we're criticized. We criticize because one of 2 reasons. We criticize someone because we're envious. Hey, I just got this. Oh, those break down easy. Oh, I got a new job. Oh, at that company? I heard that people are really rude. Oh, look, this is my new girlfriend. The second reason why we criticize, first is envy. The second is because we're afraid. We're afraid. It's interesting how 4 years ago, one of the channels that sounds like an animal's name criticized the president. But now that same channel worships the president. There's another channel that 4 years ago, a channel with 3 letters and ends with an N, worshiped the president, but now attacks the president. Last time I checked, all of us who live in this country, we want the best for this country. And if we don't have that idea, it's because you're envious or because you fear. And when that happens, we criticize, we attack. Verse 16. And the ark of the Lord came into the city of David. Michal, the daughter of Saul, looked out of the window and saw King David leaping and dancing, or leaping dancing, before the Lord. And she despised him in her heart. So there's David celebrating, waving his towel. Michal looks at him from the window and says, "Oh, David, that is so disgusting." First question. Where was Michal? Definitely she was not in the procession. She was not with David. She did not go through the process. She did not go through the worship moments. She did not walk 6 feet and offer sacrifices. She was just looking from the window. Crazy thing. The people who criticize the most are the ones that never do anything. They say that there's people who make things happen. There's people who watch things happen. And there's people who say, "What happened?" Now, Michal is from the window watching David, and David is doing his thing. He's celebrating. He's walking into the city, marching into the city with the ark. And Michal, all she's doing is saying, "David, that's not right. You are the king. You shouldn't be doing those things." But see, the truth is this. The experience of David was not Michal's experience. The experience of Abraham with God was very different than the experience of Moses with God. The experience of Peter with God was very different than the experience of John with God. Even though they were together for 3 years, their experiences with God were completely different. Your experience and my experience, completely different. We worship the same God, we believe in the same God, we read the same Bible, but our personal and spiritual experiences are different. So the worst things that we can do is criticize someone else because of their spiritual experience. Because we are all going through different experiences. Some of us accepted God when we were little. We were born in the church, 2nd, 3rd, 4th generation Adventist. Some others, we just learned about God last week. So our personal experiences with God are different. We cannot expect for everyone to look the same, act the same, eat the same, think the same. Because our experience is different. The moment that we do that, we turn into Michal. That we criticize someone who's having a deep-rooted personal experience with God. And part of the matter was because she didn't understand David. She didn't understand that experience. Because she just hadn't been there. David also needed to understand something. That for the blessing to be powerful, he needed to share it with others. Verse 17. And they brought the ark of the Lord and set it in its place inside the tent that David had pitched for it. And David offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. And when David had finished offering the burnt offerings and the peace offerings, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord of hosts. Now, up to that point, you would have said, okay, let's pray, collect an offering, go home, right? But no. Verse 19. There was one thing missing, the potluck. And distributed, read carefully, and distributed among, what's the next word? All the people. Distributed among all the people, the whole multitude of Israel, both men and women, a cake of bread, a portion of meat, and a cake of raisins. So it was the carbs, the protein, and dessert. To each one, then all the people departed, each to his house. Let's look closely at what David did. David received a blessing. And as the leader of the people, that blessing needed to be shared to be more powerful. Blessings are a lot like food. Have you ever left food in your refrigerator for a while when you were on vacation? When you come back from vacation and you left food in there, that thing grows vegetables. It rots. But what happens when there's food left over after a party? What happens when there's food left over after a potluck? What do? We put it in bags, we put it in boxes, we share it with the people. Take it, take it, take it. Right? I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but I've been in the kitchen many times after potluck is over. I've seen when people take food home. The people who are making those bags, those I don't want to call them doggy bags, but those bags of food, people bags, and they give them away. There's a sense of joy. There's a sense of satisfaction. There's a sense of we didn't know we were going to have enough, and God blessed us, and we have this left over. Take it. Because the only thing that is left is to share that blessing. When we keep the blessings for ourselves, just like the food in the refrigerator, they rot. So the best thing to do when we receive a blessing is to share it. Now, let me tell you something, because I'm responsible about this. Sharing your blessing is not telling others, hey, the Lord blessed me with this. Let me show you what the Lord blessed me with. That's not sharing the blessing. That's talking about your blessing. Okay, now that that's clear, let's move on. Paul had an experience similar to that. Paul was a very intelligent man, but he was also blunt. Paul was not John. My dear children, no. Paul was not like that at all. Paul was the guy, as we say, he was the one that called it the way he saw it. But he writes something very interesting to the Corinthians. Now, let me tell you about the Corinthians. The Corinthians were the Christian sinners. Let me tell you something about the Corinthians. The Corinthians, this is how the letters of the Corinthians came about. They had questions at their church. They sent them to Paul. And Paul responded to those questions. In fact, what we believe is 1 Corinthians, in reality, 2 Corinthians. We don't know what happens to 1 Corinthians. Because in 1 Corinthians it says, like I wrote you before, but we don't know what he wrote to the Corinthians before. So somewhere along the line, God thought that that was not important for us to know. But he writes to the Corinthians and he says every time when he changes topic, according to this, let me tell you this. According to this other thing, let me tell you this. And these guys were doing crazy things because one of them had even feelings toward his mother. These are the Christian Corinthians. So Paul responds to them. And he says in 2 Corinthians 9:13, by their approval of this service, they will glorify God because of your submission that comes from your confession of the gospel of Christ. Now, Paul, remember how he was? He's understanding that the Corinthians now, finally, after 3 letters, they're getting it. And he writes to them, guys, you are making a difference. You are making a difference because now you are fully committed to Jesus. You are not only talking about that you believe in Him, you're actually doing things because you believe in Him. Let me read that again, so now that you know what we're talking about. By their approval of this service, they will glorify God because of your submission. He's talking about other people who, because of the experience and the example of the Corinthians, now they are accepting Christ. Because of your submission that comes from your confession of the gospel of Christ and the generosity of your contribution for them and for all others. What is Paul saying to the Corinthians? Now he is not answering questions. He is giving them a praise. Guys, because of what you're saying, because of what you're living like, and because of what you're giving, other people are being blessed. Because the Corinthians received the blessing. And they not only talked about their blessing, they did something about their blessing. And they lived as if they had received the blessing. Are you awake this morning? As Christians today, we should not be living expecting a blessing. We should be living looking constantly for someone to share a blessing with. Because the only way that we can be blessed is when we share the blessings. You see, we have these water bottles at home. Have you seen those 5-gallon water bottles? And there's something interesting about those water bottles, because every other week the guy from Sparklets come and leaves 3 of those water bottles in our house. And one of the things that I try to do is that when he comes, all those water bottles are empty. I want new ones. But there's times when there's a little bit left over in one of them. What I try to do right away before the guy comes is that I take all my water bottles that I have in the house, you know, those flasks and all those things, fill them up. And every time I discover something that as much as I want to change that, it just can't happen. That every time that I fill one of those water bottles up to the rim, it cannot get any more water. If I were to ask you this morning, have you received a blessing? That's awesome. But you can only receive blessings up to the rim. You know what happens to the water that goes beyond the rim of the water bottle? It doesn't work anymore for anything. It doesn't do any purpose. It's gone. But when we empty that water bottle, we can put a lot more in it again. And the final lesson that David needed to learn is that we can't forget. We should never forget where all the blessings come from. Verse 20. And David returned to bless his household. But Michal, the daughter of Saul, came out to meet David and said, how the king of Israel honored himself today. Now, can you hear the sarcasm there? She opened the door and says, how can the king of Israel be honored today, and covering himself before the eyes of the servants, female servants, as one of the vulgar fellows shamelessly uncovers himself. So apparently David, as he was jumping, and celebrating, he took his garments off. And now you're thinking probably, oh, David, you were perfectly fine. Why did you do that? Apparently, David always was right and he made a dumb mistake. Verse 21. And David said to Michal, I was before the Lord who chose me above your father and above his house to appoint me as prince of Israel, the people of the Lord, and I would celebrate before the Lord. Let me tell you what David was talking about. In the time of David, when two armies fought against each other, the number one task of the victorious army was to capture the loser king. Because once they would capture the loser king, they would undress them, they would tie him up to an animal by the hands, and if they were not tied by an animal, they would tie him on a cart around a stick, naked. They would march into their city, and the parade was led by the naked loser king saying, announcing, and if they could have, they would have posted on Facebook for all the other nations to see. This is what happened to those who defile us. For those who try to fight against us, this is what would happen. So the worst humiliation possible would occur to that loser king. What David is doing, family, is that he disrobed himself and he was marching in front of the ark of God as if God was the victorious king and he was the loser king. And as he marched into the city, he humiliated himself, saying, I'm not worthy of being the king. God is the king. Michal did not get that. Michal is making fun of him. He is being sarcastic because of what David had done. But David responds in verse 22. I will make myself yet more contemptible than this, or I will humiliate myself even more than this, and I will be abased in your eyes but by the female servants of whom you have spoken, by them I shall be held in honor. You didn't see what happened. You were not there to witness, but they were. I was, and they understand me. What Michal had misunderstood, everyone else understood perfectly. That David that day was celebrating that even though he was anointed the king of Israel, Israel only had one true king, and that was God. Charles Spurgeon, the famous preacher, in one of his sermons, he is describing eloquently a speech that Henry IV of France was telling his troops before going into battle. And in that sermon, he said something like this: gentlemen, you are French. And there was an uproar. I am your king. They are our enemy. Spurgeon continues saying, Jesus Christ is telling us today, you are my people. I am your king. And we have one enemy. If we have a God like that, why could we dare to do anything unworthy of such a Lord?